Hello and welcome. Welcome to another day of getting to self-actualization with Yasheka Foster. I am Yasheka Foster. If you're watching me for the first time, you are watching me on Hood Parenting, and thank you so much for being here. If this is your first time here with this getting to self-actualization, go back and check out the rest of the video. Now, I will say that this is day 18 of a 28-day series. However, you do not have to watch the videos in order. You can watch them as you feel because they are all related, but they're not in sequence. And so you can watch them whatever you feel speaks to you the most. You can watch them that way. And while you're here, do me a favor and go ahead and leave a comment below. And if you feel inspired to like, share, and subscribe, please do so. That will be of the utmost. I will really appreciate that. Okay, so as we are continuing on with getting to self-actualization series, today we are talking about you can't heal what you normalize. Let me tell y'all something. Is this my jail? Listen, when it comes to you can't heal what you normalize, okay, when I tell you that this is something that I had to learn the hard way, in other words, luckily for me, my education allowed me to also look at myself. I have a bachelor's in psychology and a master's in marriage and family counseling. And so now here's the thing. I didn't just look at myself. I also seek counseling from other people, therapy, all that good stuff. But I will say that as I was studying for each one of my degrees, I was able to apply some of the things that I learned to myself, to my own life, and make some changes. And so I was really grateful for that. And sometimes they do say that you invest yourself into something that you needed or you didn't have. So for me, maybe I needed more understanding of why I felt the way I felt or why things were the way they were. And so when I went into psychology and counseling in my educational department, those things helped me to also get deeper into myself, the things that maybe the therapist or the counselor that I was seeing or continue to see or whatever, they weren't doing it the way that I did it, because I'm going to ask myself those tough questions. I am going to um be honest with myself, even if it hurts. Like if I'm the problem, I'm going to tell myself I'm the problem. And it's just that simple, because I recognize I can only control myself. But in doing all of this, one thing I noticed, and I know this is something that a lot of people go through, is things that we normalize that should not be normalized. Okay. Some of us are so used to having chaos around us that peace makes us feel uncomfortable, right? When things are quiet and peaceful, you feel so uncomfortable. Why? Because you are used to chaos. You're used to yelling. You're used to walking on eggshells. You're used to not trusting anybody. You're used to overworking, doing all the things because that's the way you think that it's supposed to do it. Anything that's soft feels foreign to you, right? And then a lot of times we go off, this is how I am. This is how I am. When we should be saying, you know what? This is how I learned to survive, because this is exactly what it is. And I'm going to give you guys a story as I continue on. Survival patterns can become so prisoners. We convince ourselves that it's not that bad, right? We convince ourselves that everybody goes through things and that life happens for everybody. Okay. This is what we continue to tell ourselves, right? And a lot of times this is something that we do when we are a mom, when we are a Black woman, a soldier, hustler. It don't matter who it is, right? We are always doing it. Why? Because we are trying to survive. Right? Are you're looking at it as this is the way I've always been, but what you're actually doing is trying to survive. But is that surviving or is that self-abandoning? Are you abandoning yourself? And I'm going to tell you a story right quick. So I am a 70s baby, born in 73. And so when I became a young girl, I would say mid preteen, like 12, 13, 14, somewhere up in there. There was a show on TV called In Living Color. Okay. And if you know anything about that, it was the Keenan Ivory, it was the Wayans brothers, or yeah, it was the Wayans brothers and sisters and things like that. It was like a family thing. And if I'm not mistaken, this is one of the platforms that which J-Lo started from as well. Well, with that being said, they had this segment of this couple that would always fight each other, right? This is because, you know, they would do like skits throughout the show. And so it was this one segment. I cannot remember what I cannot remember what it was called, and I'm gonna have to do some research because I always use this as an example, and I'm not really sure what the skit was called, but I remember it being the sister and I think maybe one of the brothers or somebody else. They would get dressed up as if they were older people, like older people, and they would be like pretending to be husband and wife. And so while they were pretending to be husband and wife, they would have altercations. And so I'm talking like physical altercations where they would try to off each other. They would try to unalive each other for the sake of that's demonstrating that's how Black families were or Black households were. And so I say this because in my reality, that was pretty much how Black families were, right? When it came to the husband and the wife, they would do all these things. And then they would in the skit always saying, but we still together. And so it was literally drawing dark humor to something that we should have really paid attention to. And that is being in unhealthy relationships and normalize it as if it's should be acceptable. And so when I became a young woman and I started to date, when I was dating my first husband, that was something that he and I engaged in, right? It started with, well, regardless of how it started with him, but it was one of those things that once he introduced it to the relationship, it became a let me get you before you get me was my mentality because I knew it was coming. I knew you were going to try to fight me for something or do something to me. So let me get you before you get me, right? That was my mentality going forward. And at this point, we were married. I was 18, he was 22, and we stayed together for like 4 years or so. And so I say this because I thought it was normal. I thought it was normal to be in a relationship. And if you wasn't fighting each other or doing things like that, you ain't love the other person. Okay. I'm just saying that's what I was told in life. Those are some of the things that I remember experiencing or understanding is that was part of it. And if you ain't doing that, then because you got to fight for what you got to fight for the love you want, you got to fight for the person, you got to do all the things, baby. That's toxicity. Okay, that is not normal, and we got to heal from what we thought was normal because it's not normal, right? And as long as we keep on pretending that it's normal and accepting it as so, we will never get to where we need to be in this life in terms of self-actualization. Okay. Because in my mind, my first husband and I, it was not until the military started to tell me that this was unacceptable. And it had nothing to do with the fact that we were fighting or anything like that. It was now it became, or it could become a problem that's going to affect my job. Right. So now that it's become a problem that could affect my job, now I'm paying attention. And so when I started to really ask questions, and people would tell me, like, that's not normal for you and your husband to be fighting anyway. And so it was me because, again, I'm 18, 19 years of age, fresh out of Detroit, fresh out of my mom's home. He's fresh out of his mom's home. We get married as I'm joining the military or whatever, or once I join the military after training, we get married and then we go off and say we're going to live happily ever after, right? And we both seen so much as young kids and as kids in our household till we really thought that what we were doing was normal. And and he felt like it as being a man, unless he had control of his woman in a certain kind of way, then he wasn't being a man. And so, baby, I'm so glad that I've grown from that. Okay. I'm so glad that I've grown from that. Healing starts with telling the truth. Okay. Healing starts with telling the truth. And say this with me: I've learned this, I inherited this, but I don't have to keep this. Okay. I've learned this, I inherited this, but I don't have to keep this. And so when I think about the way that my first husband and I were, I recognize that even in my second marriage and any relationship after that, that hey, this isn't healthy. We can't pretend like it is. Now, are you going to have situations in a marriage? Of course. But it shouldn't come to the point where you're disrespecting each other, to the point where you're verbally disrespecting each other, putting your hands on one another, manipulating one another, or doing something that's causing some type of trauma or whatever, right? Whether it be some type of abuse. Never do that, right? That's not normal in a relationship, but we think that it is. Why? Because of what we've been told. And so, or what we saw. And so I have to remind you, I learned this, I inherited this, but I don't have to keep this. Okay. Healing begins when we stop defending what's damaging us. That's how healing begins, right? That's how healing begins. And some normalized hurt that we normalize, just like I was saying before, always being the strong one. We look at that as being normal, right? You always being the strong one, right? You the one that everybody come to and say, here's my problems. I'm gonna dump everything on you and I need you to figure it out. Okay. That's not normal, right? Everybody got their own lives to figure out. So stop normalizing putting all the stuff on the strong person. Stop normalize that, because that person, listen, that person got to take a knee too. Okay. Never asking for help. We're gonna is that these are examples of normalizing hurt. Never asking for help, because you want to always appear as the strong one. You want to always look as if you got it. You don't have no issues or anything like that. That's not normal. Okay. And we cannot heal from what we continue to normalize. Believing love is equal to pain or sacrifice. Again, me talking about the situation with my first husband. I thought that that's how relationships were. You fought, you know, okay? And then you get it together, okay? And then you live another day, right? Because we were both from the city of Detroit. You know what I mean? And people can act like that doesn't matter. It does matter, because those were the things that we seen around us. So we thought it was normal. It was not until I joined the military and we both seen something different that we realized it was not normal. But at that point, it was too late to say the marriage, honey. Okay. It was too late to save it. However, he's remarried and yeah. Okay. So all right. And then rewriting the pattern is your responsibility, right? Rewriting the pattern is your responsibility. And let me share this with you. When my son, the son that my first husband and I had together, started crawling, okay? At this time, we were in Germany, because that's where my son was born in Germany when I was in the military. And I remember one day us being in my son's bedroom, because it was a Sunday, because I'm only on home probably Saturday and Sunday, if that was it, because I wasn't home much. Anyway, so one particular day I was changing his linen in his bed, and his father came in there because he had a nursery. His father came in there and we were playing. It wasn't anything serious. We were just playing. And so his father pinched me, because he always would pinch. Like, that's something he learned from his mom, to pinch people. That's like the worst thing you could do to a person. But he would pinch me, and he would always try to pinch me under my arm, right? Where you got that fat up under there, right? So he pinched me up under my arm, and when he did that, I kind of flinched back and told him, "Hey, out that hurt, right?" Although we were playing, I said that it hurt. Well, at the time that I was saying this to him, at the time, our kid, he was about, this was December. So he was about 9 months old. Okay. This was between December and January. So he's about 9, 10 months old at this point. He come crawling to the doorway of his nursery. And just as his father pinched me and I pulled back, my son set up on his behind. You know how a kid crawls and then they turn around and set up on their behind, but they're still on the floor. And so he heard me say, "Ouch, that hurts." He immediately started crying. My son immediately started crying, because in his mind, his father was hurting me, because I guess he heard the screech in my voice, although we were playing, but it also could have been a trauma response from things that he had seen or heard us go through before. And so in his mind, this was just another one of those things, because although babies are little or whatever, right? Sometimes we don't know that they still understand. We don't know that they still understand emotions. They understand rise and tone, rise and falls of voices, right? And so for me, it was in that moment that I decided that I wasn't going to stay there, because I didn't want my son to grow up thinking that that was okay, right? And so things happen, and within a little while after that, he and I slowly we separated, and then we eventually divorced. But I knew that it was up to me, because he had seen it in his family with his parents. I had seen it in my family. I had seen it with the elders in my family. So in our mind, physical assault or physical, you know, abuse with one another was normal. And so I didn't want my son to think that that was okay. Okay. And so I had to make a decision, because I knew the relationship wasn't going to change, right? Because it was too much that was going on. It was too much that we bought into the relationship of our unhealed self, our childhood, that we didn't know that was not healthy for us. Okay. And so that's why it is your responsibility to rewrite the pattern. Once you see it, you got to shift it. not overnight, but one choice at a time. And for me, that was the choice, right? That was the choice. And moving forward, I made sure that I was never in a situation like that again where my son saw that, right? Especially with, and to this day, he's 30 years of age. He does not remember any of it. And not only that, he cannot even believe it to be so. In his mind, there's no way in the world I was in a relationship with a man that put his hands on me, because of the fact that he looks at me as being this immortal being that's just unstoppable and strong and all these things. And so his mind is like, no, not my mother. She's too strong for that. Right. But it wasn't that I wasn't strong. It's just that I thought it was normal. I thought it was normal because, see, I never saw myself as being abused, because when I think about abuse, I think about people that's hovering in the corner or that's just sitting there taking it or whatever. That was never my story. So I didn't see it as a problem. But of course, we know it's a problem, or it was a problem. And so it was my responsibility to make sure that I did not give that to my son. And even though his father didn't see it, I knew I had to be the one that changed it, right? So you break the cycle when you stop pretending it's not a problem. You set your kids free when you model a new definition of peace, love, and joy. Okay. You model that, and your kids, our kids, deserve that. Okay. Now, one thing I want to leave you guys with before we close, things I want to leave you guys with before we close: you can't heal what you keep justifying. You can't grow when you won't tell the truth, and you can't thrive while wearing a mask that's choking you. And so think about it from that perspective, right? If you are trying to get to self-actualization, the highest form, right, of the highest form of Maslow's hierarchy of need, right? Self-actualization. In order for you to get there, there are so many things that are levels to the, excuse me, sub levels to the levels, right? Sub levels to levels that we have to go through. And when it talks about our psychological and things like that, those are still in levels 1 and 2, because we cannot normalize things that we know is not normal. And so we have to get away from them, because why? We can't heal if those things are still keeping us rooted, keeping us in delusion, or like the kids would say, delulu. Okay. All right. So we are going to wrap this up. So before you go, if you are here, comment below what you're normalizing that you realize that needs to heal. Okay. You don't have to, and if you don't want to put it down below, then go ahead and DM me and tell me what it is, something that you are aware of that you are still normalizing and you know you need to heal from. Right. And I know that we do things, and I mean, it's things that we do so common and so normal until we don't realize that it's not normal, because we do it every day. It's like we just be like, I didn't know that wasn't normal. I knew people that talk to each other, like couples that talk to each other and call them like they'll argue, and their arguing wasn't just like, you're arguing about a situation. It was name calling. I'm talking name calling, like with the B word and hoes. And I mean, it was just awful. But in their mind, that was normal. And so when I would see this, I was like, hey, this isn't normal. Like, I don't know why. I don't know how y'all grew up or whatever, what you saw, but this isn't normal. And so once they realized that was true, of course, I mean, they didn't make it, they divorced, but it was one of those things that they recognized that them two had came into the relationship with a lot of things that was not healed. And talking to each other like that was just, I mean, that's a lot. I couldn't even imagine. Okay. And I mean, not now anyway. Now, not now. Okay. But anyway, we're going to go ahead and wrap up this episode of Getting to Self-Actualization. And this one is called You Can't Heal What You Normalize. And so again, if you are here for the first time, go ahead and say hello. If you didn't catch me on the live and you catch it on the replay, go ahead and tell me below you catch it on the replay. But at the same time, show your girl some love. Comment below, share, like, subscribe, turn on your notifications, so when I do go live, you will know that I go live here on this platform. Now, with that being said, I know some people are looking for a self-actualization coach or a life strategist, honey, and I am certified, trained in all the areas. And so at the bottom of this video, I do have a link in which you can go ahead and schedule a consult with me. No, this is one of those no hassle, no. If you decide that I'm not for you, then you go on about your way. No obligations, no nothing. But it's a 15-minute consultation. And yeah, and I love to see if I'm a good fit. But I'm gonna tell you, like I tell everybody, once you meet me and work with me, you're gonna realize, you know what? I didn't know that I needed those sprinkles of rainbow and sunshine in my life every day. I didn't know I needed those glittering and rainbows and sunshine. I didn't know I needed that. So I'm gonna go ahead and hire her because I recognize I need her in my life. Okay. Now listen, go ahead and catch me tomorrow at the same time here on this platform for as we continue on with getting to self-actualization. All right. Take care and bye.